Call the meeting to order. It's Tuesday, October 1st, and it's 5:31. I'm going to open up for public comments, but it doesn't appear that we have any public other than city employees. I suppose they're public too. Hi, Sam, how are you? So we're going to move right along to the consent agenda. Was error on line 36, which has been already fixed. And so we're not going to have to pull the consent agenda out. It's just not recorded on the packets, as packets were not were already prepared prior to the discovery of the mistake. So it's already taken care of. Misspelled my last name.
And line 36,
Yeah.
mine doesn't have anything on that line. It was line 32. 32. Okay,
32, I'm sorry, 32. So with that, do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
I'll move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed signify by saying aye. Motion carries. Okay. I guess we can move right along to staff reports. Charlie, are you doing staff or? Okay, got it.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, the first staff issue I have for you all is discussing potential building improvement grant revisions. So these are still just a work in progress, and this is just a discussion item for tonight. But earlier this year, the Urban Renewal Agency and some members of the agency discussed the possibility of updating the building improvement grant guidelines to include providing additional incentives and or additional consideration for applications that involve buildings that would enhance the vitality of downtown Dallas during the evening hours. So the attachment you have is the draft guidelines for the next fiscal year, so fiscal year 2025 to 2026. And on the second page of those guidelines under targeted activities right now is the draft language we have regarding this potential new targeted activity that's been discussed by the agency. And so what we're looking for is just some general feedback on the viability of this targeted activity, as well as what you think this language should say to be as inclusive or exclusive as you all would recommend it to be to the agency, so that we have a better idea of where your thinking is before we continue to hammer out the details on these guidelines for the next fiscal year. So right now, the language that we have here says that the project must be associated with preparing a building for a use whose regular hours extend past 7 p.m. These types of uses may include restaurants, arcades, retail stores, etc. So again, just looking to get your feedback on what these potential guidelines and target activities may be, and if we want to widen the scope even farther or narrow it.
Go ahead.
Just an example of what that may look like for somebody.
So right now, under the targeted activities, we target activities like upper story reutilization, vacant building reutilization, and new construction on vacant land or as a building addition. So what we're proposing, this would be an additional targeted activity. So this wouldn't be limiting the grant applications to only being for those targeted activities, but it would make any application that has this new targeted activity more competitive versus another application that wouldn't have that same targeted activity.
Tyler, I think the question is that what type of application would be made to, that would fall underneath this, nighttime vitality? Yeah, who would, yeah, what kind of application would be submitted that would fall underneath this, this topic?
So-
Lighting, if they want to do additional lighting, or if they did something different that, wouldn't normally see in, a daytime, business.
No, so the substance of the application wouldn't change. It would still be anything that falls under the regular building improvement grant guidelines, but this would be an additional layer of consideration for those types of uses that would be typically open sometime past 7 p.m. and into the nighttime. So the application would still be able to cover anything that is already outlined on the top half of page 2 here. So all of those eligible activities would still be able to be applied for, but these targeted activities would allow for us to be more selective in the applications that are moving forward if it is a very competitive process. Or the other option would be to recommend that we don't target these particular activities.
So there's more types of, businesses that do stay open past, like the theater, for example. And if let's say that somebody wanted to bring a theater to town and use one of the buildings, for, nighttime theater, for performances and stuff like that, would that fall under nighttime? Because I'm a little confused as to why we really need this, because, if it kind of is covered already under targeted activities with the other, items listed here, then what's the purpose of it? That's why I was asking the question the way it was. What kind of application would be submitted that would fall underneath that topic? And your answer was that it actually is covered by all of the other ones too, but we have this extra one now that I just don't understand why. And maybe I'm just being confused about this. Anybody else have any comments? Do you have?
Questions for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Is there competitiveness in the applications that you receive that any of those targeted activities you get considered?
I don't. How would you evaluate that, Charlie?
Is there competitiveness at any point in time with this where any of those actually even get considered?
Not necessarily, but as you know, with these particular applications, the agency reviews each one individually and votes on it. So as they're deliberating and making their decision, they can decide in theory whether they fund it as it's presented. Maybe they say they'll fund it at a lower level. Maybe they'll reject it and kick it back to the applicant and make them change something. Maybe they'll reject it entirely. They have the option of doing any one of those things. What you're asking, I think, is has this been a competitive process? And the answer is no. And again, just to make it clear, we're as staff, we're relaying back to you as the advisory committee on something that the agency brought up recently. So we're trying to, honor that request. I don't know how well thought out it was necessarily, but there was a desire to see if we could use this program to provide an extra incentive for what at least one member of the agency, maybe more, felt was something that Dallas needed. So what we're asking you is to decide, do you agree with that? Or do you agree that maybe there should be some other incentive for something else? So I think that's the discussion. Again, I don't think we want to necessarily solve this dilemma tonight. This is just because we have until next July to, rehash the whole program. We're not going to change it in the middle of the cycle. So we got plenty of time to sort this out.
Yeah.
So this is just an opportunity to have you guys weigh in on what we heard from the agency.
In my opinion, humble as it is, I don't see why we have to have something else if we could just modify the wording or just if we don't reject applications because it's a nighttime business right now, why do we have to have something in here to include something that we're already accepting applications for?
My bigger concern would be and I'm not taking a position by saying this, but just asking the question, are we getting into the position where we're picking winners, losers, businesses? And should we be?
Again, I think that's definitely something for this advisory committee to consider. If the grant, if you all think it is a wise proposition for the grant to have these additional targeted activities. And so again, at the staff level, we're not proponents of it either way. We're simply relaying the request from a member of the agency to have you all evaluate this potential option as a way to potentially promote more nighttime vitality in downtown by adding an additional incentive into our already existing grant language.
Sam, have you stay open after 7, don't you? Have you ever had a problem getting a grant from the urban renewal to do anything in your business?
No.
So
I mean,
here's
I
an
understand the
example.
incentive side too. I mean,
Yeah.
I can see both sides, because the incentive side would be there for. Let's say we have an awful lot of buildings downtown that are used as either office buildings or schools or things like this
Yeah.
that are basically boarded up and shut down at 5 o'clock and
Yeah.
long term, does that help the vitality of our town? I don't really think so. So if there's that incentive, I think might incentivize someone to open a new business knowing that they would get preferential treatment in a grant program.
See, that's
But I don't know
where
if
I
it's
think that
necessarily-
I think this is where I'm thinking that it's going to, is that they're giving additional incentives for people with nighttime businesses to apply for grant. You're gonna rate them higher than you would an office building that closes at 5 p.m. And that's, I think, stepping in an area that I'd just as soon not go to, is to say that, well, we're gonna give somebody preferential treatment because it's a nighttime business versus just a normal daytime business.
Yeah, and again, this again would be an additional targeted activity that the agency considers when they're making their decision. So it wouldn't be at the staff level.
Yeah,
I think as a retailer that this would disincentivize someone that's wanting to rehab a building, to put in a retail business to retail sales like mine is, that basically is a 9 to 5 or 9:30 to 5:30 business. Make them open past 7 because, it takes a lot of people to have a second shift to come in for hours later than the first shift is there. That's why we've never stayed open later than 6 o'clock
Yeah.
back in the heyday.
more of an
Dallas
economic
retail.
issue than anything else.
Yeah, so I'd say it's a disincentive to businesses that are not geared towards restaurants, bars, and things like that.
I think the bigger,
Marlene,
Well, I was just, I'm gonna just go through 2 examples, so. Let's use my restaurant, which I'm still working at to get open. So we never had a stage in there, but we went ahead and built a stage and we got lighting for it and everything so that we'd be able to have a little performing stage in the restaurant now. Is that something that's an example of what would incentivize? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what it is that the agency would be looking for that would tip my application over needing a stage and everything for evening entertainment over somebody else's application.
Yeah, I think that would be something that could be one of those additional aspects that the agency would want to consider. Again, we're more looking for your input on kind of where, how broad or how narrow, or if at all, this targeted activity would be defined as. So do we want it to be defined as something very narrow where it's very specific uses, or would it be something that's more broad that the agency could consider under this definition of promoting nighttime vitality? So that's definitely something that could be an option with this. It depends on what you all as an advisory body want to recommend to the agency.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's something that I've never. Says here eligible activities included on element 2. I have always had a problem in number 4. Where exterior lighting, and this is part of a larger project, exterior lighting alone is not an eligible activity. I always felt that exterior lighting is, especially with the homeless and the problems that I have with that, I've always felt that having lighting has been part of this, maybe even a standalone. Some of these old buildings, you've got to have an electrician come in and put a whole new circuit in for you to get enough exterior lighting. It can get really expensive. I mean, this is aside from what.
Yeah, well, it would fall under the nighttime,
Well, yeah, it
lighting,
could fall under a
but-
nighttime setting, that's for sure.
yeah, but I don't know. I'm still a little puzzled as to why somebody would be given a lower rating because of their nighttime activity versus somebody that closed at 5 or 5:30. And that should not be included in any kind of decision making when it comes to giving a grant. That is, that an individual or a business is applied for a grant, they should not be singled out because they're gonna be open after 7 PM, or if they're gonna be, if they're open until 5:30. If that, whoever gets, who gets the higher priority I think is where this is going, and I just as soon not get into that area. That should be a decision of the agency when they're approving grants. They should have their own policies on doing that. It shouldn't be part of anything that we need to decide for or make changes to a targeted activity. Targeted activity should be anything that somebody could apply a grant for, regardless of what time they close or what time they open. Does anybody disagree with that statement?
Not that I necessarily disagree, but I would like to expand on that. I mean, we're talking about, targeted activity is specifically there, it's saying specifically we're trying to increase economic vitality.
Right.
Of the downtown, which leads me to wonder, is the deficit of economic vitality downtown because we don't have a nightlife downtown, or is it an overall issue? So I mean, is targeting this going to increase the economic vitality downtown any more so than targeting anything?
Yeah, see, if let's say I opened up a business and I had some activity, maybe another bar or something, which we really need in this town, we gotta have more bars. So I want to open up a business that has been normally a 9 to 5 business, and I go in there and apply for grant without this provision. Am I eligible for that grant, or do I get denied because of the activity that I'm going to be doing there?
So again, the targeted activity doesn't change your eligibility for the grant. The eligibility requirements are still the same, but the targeted activity would be essentially the agency and the district through the grant program identifying this particular use as something that they want to target through the grant program. So when the agency is considering an application, in the instance that perhaps an application was competitive or it was a very competitive process, having additional targeted activities would be additional ways for the agency to determine how to allocate money in the event of a very competitive
So do
process.
they discourage people from applying for grants and do have a targeted out? I don't understand which one of these other 3 would prevent somebody from coming in and opening up a business that's open after 7 o'clock.
It doesn't. So it's just a weighted. So if you have 2 or 3 applying for the fixed amount of funds, it just weighs one a little higher by having the nighttime piece. You still have to hit all the other targets. It just opens another target.
Yeah.
So it's an incentive to try to get spaces that are getting remodeled for evening use. I understand it, but it's a chicken and egg. It's like, is it that you don't have residences downtown that don't frequent businesses and so there's not demand, or is it a so
Right.
well, and this is one of those things where you try and find out. I'm not sure what the process is if it's that competitive. It seems like people that meet the other targeted criteria are applying for grants and getting the grant. I just think that if it does get competitive, then it just would weigh it in their favor if it's nighttime.
What, yeah, Charlie, you got a question? Go ahead.
So you could certainly make this kind of process. We haven't done that in the past. We did that with the ARPA grant. So you could have an open and a closed window for your grant application period, for example. You could say, for example, maybe it opens on June 15th and it closes on July 15th each year. And you're only gonna weigh the applications that you receive in that time period, and you're gonna weigh and rank all of those. You can do it that way if you want. I'll do it that way right now. But another way to look at this is, and this is where I think the agency member was going, he picked up a certain pet criteria that, to him made sense. But you could use this as a tool to influence the kinds of businesses that you see downtown. We've heard a lot of concern amongst this group, amongst others, about, well, we got too much of this, not enough of that. It's a free market economy, as we all know. We're not regulating and steering away the businesses per se. But you through a carrot approach, you could use this program as a tool to potentially influence the kinds of businesses you see downtown. I'm just saying, this is another more pulling this out of the weeds a little bit, looking at it at a higher level. Is you have a tool at your disposal. You could, if you chose, use that tool as a way to influence the kinds of businesses you see downtown. Obviously, we could take the stick approach, which has been discussed as well, and we could start through our land development code, we could start regulating out certain types of businesses downtown that we maybe don't want to see anymore, which is another area of discussion that you can initiate if you so choose.
Because this does bring to light some other types of businesses that might want to stay open after 7 o'clock. Let's say the new building. We have a commercial area on the bottom floor and we have shops. Maybe some of those shops want to stay open after 7 p.m. What if they're like a clothing shop? Would that exclude them from falling
It's gonna be a
under
brand new
that type of
building, so I don't
activity?
anticipate they'd be applying for any building improvement grants for one. So I don't know if that's the best example.
Yeah, well, but still, really any type of business could stay open after 7 p.m. What we're doing, we're isolating down the types of business that we're referring to.
Could we potentially look at this more open-ended instead of having a statement that's saying basically targeting nighttime vitality, but we have an open-ended statement that basically says something to the effect of, as a targeted activity, anything that leads to identified methods of increasing economic vitality or something like that. I mean, these other targets are very specific in terms of like revitalizing vacant land or vacant buildings or something like that. Just targeting something that's going to build the.
I think you could definitely do that, and this would be the place to start defining what those actually were. And another example, you could even recommend that you create, a different tier system for grant awards for your targeted businesses versus your non-targeted businesses, for example. So maybe the targeted businesses are eligible for a larger grant than the non-targeted businesses. Just throwing out examples.
And I'd say I'd say we've done an element of that with the changes this year, and specifically changing the guidelines to make it so that any buildings receiving grants have to be vacant or not vacant and usable by the public. That way we're not having building improvement grant funds being used for buildings that will remain vacant or remain being used for any uses that aren't public facing uses like storage or drop shipping or anything like that. So I imagine that might be the direction that you're more talking about, Sam.
What action are you looking for from us then? Just,
Or again, we're not looking for action, just looking for, this is just a discussion item.
just want to discuss it. So we pretty much discussed it.
I've got some more.
Well, sure, go ahead.
So I think one question we should ask amongst ourselves is, do we want to see more nighttime activity in Dallas? Because I think if the answer is yes, then I think pursuing this extra targeted activity to give those types of businesses an incentive to do more would be beneficial. But I think that's the question we need to ask ourselves, is that something important for our district to have more nighttime
Well,
activity?
I have to go back with Tori. I agree with what he said about the chicken and egg approach. Do we have enough activity going on downtown right now to do that? I think if we do put a hotel downtown, wow, that's gonna really improve nighttime activity. And that's gonna really incentivize businesses in doing stuff for nighttime activities. And so, but if we don't go to hotel, just do office building and stuff like that, you're not really bringing a lot of activity after 5 p.m. or 5:30 p.m. Because the town is pretty much closed up. But with people being around all the time, it might be a good thing, Bob.
Well, speaking for myself and possibly a little bit for Ken and Marlene and you, we live within the lifetime of when this was a retail center. All the businesses were filled with retail businesses. The library was a furniture store. Marlene's place was a grocery store. There were all of the small town needs that you could find in Dallas at those time. And I've held out hope that retailers would find downtown again, a new generation that wanted to be in retail. But I have very little hope that that's gonna happen. I think we need to decide what direction we want the downtown business district to be in. Jewelry store is gonna be there until I'm not there, but I'm one of the few retailers that still operate in downtown, and I'm sure there are more that I can't think of off the top of my head. But we need to come up with a direction we think the growth and or revitalization in downtown is going to go. And then
I think that's a good point, because this town used to be all, the first American title was, what was that?
was Western Auto.
Or, yeah, so,
That could very well be one of your targets. I mean, maybe you decide one of your targets is traditional goods retailing. You define that, and that's.
I
gonna be
think
what-
the day and age.
I think it should be,
is
I don't think it should be so inclusive, but again, I think the decision when, if I were in the group that was making a decision to allow grants, I would allow based upon the needs of the community. Okay, so right now, what are the needs of the community? Well, obviously nighttime is not really big for downtown, other than basically Court Street and Church and the 900 block on Main Street. That's your nighttime activity right now. And then some on Mill Street. So that's your nighttime activity at this point. But let's say in 2 years, we get the building there, now we got a hotel in there. Now we start to have activity downtown where people are there, they need to go out and eat, they want to spend some time together with friends, neighbors, whatever. And so they're downtown and they want to do activities downtown. Now we've even got more incentive to do nighttime activity. So it's gonna change if we change, Trevor.
I agree with that. I think it would be beneficial for us to try and plan ahead to meet the time that building would be done, so that we're not then trying to play catch up
Yeah.
with helping the rest of the town meet what we were envisioning for that plot.
I disagree. I think that we need a lot more nighttime downtown, but not necessarily the same nighttime. As a restaurant downtown, I recognize from my customer accounts and extrapolating from that, that the downtown core is probably accessing 1 to 2% of the town's population.
Yeah.
Our town's been growing a lot, and for whatever reason, the 98% that live all around us don't want to come to our downtown in the evening time once they're off work. And then, I mean, it has to be an evening time thing because I'm a bedroom community, so they're all working, or not all of them, but 2/3 of them are working elsewhere. They come here in the evening and they don't come downtown. So I think that this should be, it may not be the incentivized portion, but it should.
Yeah. I agree with that, but there are other groups that would handle that public relation to get people that live down south of, or east of town and north of town to the downtown area. How do you get that? You gotta advertise, you gotta get people out there that say, hey, we got a lot of activity.
And we need more activity.
And that's through advertisement.
And
you
you
got-
got, it's
Yeah.
theater, it's
And
activities, it's things like that.
Yeah, I like that nighttime activity. I like that it's a targeted. I would prefer to spend more time here than going to Salem or somewhere. So
Yeah.
if there were more activities and there were more options for dining and things like that, then I think I would be
yeah,
down
and
here more.
that may change in a couple of years. But for right now, it's.
Well, I agree. I think
kinda
it's
slow, but
doing it before it's, yeah, when it's built and then there's a influx of demand for those things and we have to work through it. I agree that it's a good idea to have it in place so we're ready.
I think this statement should just be changed to where it says, projects must be associated with, an, building use after, 7 p.m. and just leave it at that.
Yeah, you don't have to have the
Don't-
restaurants and
don't,
things. Yeah.
Give types of buildings and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because you want any business that will stay open after 7 p.m. to do so, encourage it. Yes.
The people bypassing downtown Dallas is nothing new. My parents told me that when they bought their business from the Sholins, they told them to be aware that when people say they're going to town, they mean they're going to Salem. If they say they're going downtown, they're going to downtown. It's always been that way in my
Yeah,
lifetime.
oh, yeah. Mayor,
Dallas has a reputation of not being business friendly. And several years ago, we came across a provision in the central business district that any new construction has to be 2 stories or more. And we had a couple of visitors to come to Dallas. And they wanted to put a car lot over on the old Carl May property on the corner of Church and Washington. But he said, I don't need a 2-story business to sell used cars. So he went to another town. So I was talking with the city manager at the time and I said, well, what can we do? He said, well, let's make a presentation to the planning commission to strike that 2-story requirement. So I went there representing the council. At the time, I was just a counselor and made the presentation and they laughed at me. But we got the last laugh because their recommendations had to come back to the council. And the council knocked that provision out of there 9-0. Because I did an inventory of the buildings built in the 80s, the banks. You don't have a 2-story bank in Dallas. So we changed it. Now I'm looking around this room and I'm one of the few, I'm probably the only one that lives 3 blocks from here. Yeah, on Main Street, USA. So doing what we're talking about doesn't bother me in my house. It's been in the family since 1936. But it's something we have to do to make it more friendly to do business in Dallas. So if we want to add this provision, I have no problems with it because it's just adding some other positive things. And if people want to come to Dallas and do their shopping here, fine, let's do it. But let's make it easy for these people to do it. And I don't know, it's just frustrating at times to hear people going to town. And And I'm a fifth generation Woods in this town and it won't change. That part won't change. But if we can make it easy for people to shop in Dallas, go out to have dinner after 7 o'clock in Dallas, and maybe stop at the ice cream shop on the way home after dinner. You know, things like that. We need to make it easy.
I agree. And I think that the wording of just taking the type of business out of there is because like an ice cream shop might want to stay open after 7 p.m.
Or used to.
The one over on the movie theater is open too. Forget their name.
So I think striking the type of business is probably appropriate. Just, you know, if the applicant is wanting to do a business that's going to be open after 7 p.m., they should be given a little bit higher priority possibly then. And that could be a judgment of the agency. That sound reasonable?
Sounds good.
So
Alright.
there's nothing that we really have to do other than just have this discussion.
No, we'll continue refining the guidelines for the next fiscal year, and then at some point, once we have a final draft for you all, we'll have it ready for your feedback before it goes to the agency.
I just wanted to jump the next page over on page 4. I was just curious. It looks like there's an added evaluation that if after 45 days an incomplete application is not completed, it's withdrawn and they'd have to resubmit a brand new application. I was just curious the background on that. Is that something we've seen as an issue, or is that just to try and keep the books clean on what's being asked for?
So I'll say it is an issue in the sense that so when someone submits an application, we essentially on our tracking sheet, we have that money allocated, so to speak.
Gotcha.
So if we get an application and it's incomplete, we're holding on to the application waiting for them to complete it, but we're not marketing those funds that they're asking for as potentially available. We're potentially available once they withdraw, or we deny the application, which is kind of the precipice for this. So the 45 days, what we're doing there is essentially just we're making it so the applicant is doing their due diligence to where if they're having an incomplete application, they need to complete it and get it in within 45 days, or else they run the risk of, essentially losing the funding that they're asking for to the next application that comes in. Because I mean, it's not super rare, but we'll have instances where someone will, submit their application, within the first couple of weeks of the application window opening, and the application's incomplete. They're missing items. They're missing items that we can't move forward on the application without these items, and we won't hear from them for 6-7 months. And then we're running into budget deadlines, and then we're also running into this issue similar to, I'd say, an issue that we ran into last year with the minor improvement grant program, that we thought that we had applications that were complete and ready to go, and then all those folks withdrew their applications, and we had $4,000 left over at the end of the fiscal year. So the idea behind that is to give the applicant essentially a harder deadline to fully complete their application. And then that way we can also work on the staff report and then get it to the agency and get the process moving in a faster way, rather than just having it kind of sit in this weird purgatory state for a while.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
So what if a person applying for a grant is requiring contractors to do the work, needing to find out if they're getting the grant before they can go ahead and sign the paperwork with the contractor, and then the contractor can't get in to do the work for 60 or 90 days?
Yeah, so we're not asking them to do the project in 45 days. What we're saying is sometimes we will receive an application that is missing items like the quote from a contractor or the multiple bids or photos of the project site or the itemized list of materials.
To have
Right. Right. So when they submit the application, that 45-day window starts. And for some reason, if it's incomplete, Ben will send them an email. Then they have 45 days, or else they'll essentially just have to resubmit the application as we're removing it from the queue.
Bob, I think that was covered back when we first set up these grant programs. I think we talked about that at that point. That was,
My memory's getting bad because I've been doing this for so long.
remember what? Okay. Have we given you enough input?
Yeah. So once we have that final draft, we'll have it over to you all for again another look over, and then at that point you would either recommend it as it is or recommend it with changes to the agency.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
All right.
The next item?
Yeah, you got me for the next item too. So these are some of select results from the 791 Main Street Community Survey. We sent out this survey to the community to get feedback on the potential design as well as site uses, and the future vision for the 791 Main Street property. In total, we received about 184 responses. This matches typically what we'll receive on community surveys. The mill site survey was an outlier in that received 1,000 responses, but that 184 number is closer to what we would typically receive in other surveys when we looked back. And so what I just wanted to do is go through some of these questions and then just go through them with you, and then if you all have any questions, you can always feel free to ask. So looking at this first slide here, vision statement feedback, we outlined what the vision was for this project and asked folks whether or not they agree, what level they agree. And so 52% of those that replied said that they strongly agree. An additional 31% said somewhat agree. So overwhelmingly, people agree with the vision for the project. And in that next slide under vision statement feedback, we asked which one of these statements might not be consistent with your vision for the project. And so we allowed them to pick up to 3. So the 3 highest responses were serve as an iconic gateway in the downtown, be an economic asset by generating tax revenue, and then be a multi-story mixed-use building with restaurant uses on the ground floor and lodging on the above floors. So again, that's a bit mixed results. We weren't quite sure how to make out on the results from there.
It sounds like a loaded question almost, because you add the word not consistent into that, and that kind of confuses people. Kind of like ballot measures, says that this is not the way it's gonna be, and then you vote yes, because I like the way it was. Instead, but it's not. So that could have been the confusion on that. Because I would think that the first one would be, I can't see why they would not agree that that is a good vision for the building.
Well, when we looked at kind of the more open responses, one of the major themes from the open responses were people would like to see a park or some kind of open space there. So that could kind of be where a lot of those folks may have been going in that direction. We didn't include any of the open response questions on this just because there's really no easily digestible way to aggregate those onto on a PowerPoint slide like this. So we decided to leave those out for a lot of the multiple choice ones. But going forward, on that downtown visitation slide, we asked folks how often they were visiting downtown, and most of them are either visiting daily or weekly. Yeah.
Being less than a block away from the site, I get a lot of people come in asking what's happening to it. And when I mentioned that the plan is to find a builder for a 3 or 4 story hotel / apartment building with retail on the bottom floor and a restaurant. Pretty much across the board, the answer is you've gotta be kidding. That's never gonna go in downtown Dallas. So just reporting what people are telling me.
So on here, the downtown visitation, most people are visiting daily or weekly. Um, again, I think that's a sign that this building could also potentially be a good use and a good opportunity for residents that are visiting downtown regularly to have additional opportunities to spend time downtown.
Good follow-up question to that would be, where do they, if they reside in Dallas, or do they reside outside of Dallas, or do they? And if they reside in Dallas, what part of Dallas are they in? So you can find out where these folks are that are responding to this.
Yeah, we did ask a question like that. So that we asked that they provided their zip code, and I think it was 97 or 98% of people who replied to the survey lived in Dallas. And then based on those that did provide more specified location data, they were pretty much spread out evenly across the community.
Oh, okay, good.
On the general design slides here, which of the preliminary designs above best matches what you'd like to see? So I'd say the first three were pretty evenly split, but the design one, that 4-story hotel, received the plurality there, and then design two, following behind that. So the majority of folks seem to be more amenable to that hotel concept. And then again, we asked a follow-up question about what would be acceptable. So we asked essentially kind of what they prefer, what best matches their vision, and then what would they find acceptable. And so you'll see there that they were able to select as many of these as they wished, which is why you see those numbers not quite adding up to 184. So again, it looks like the lowest score is the 5-story apartment um, design, but again, the two leading were design 1 and 2, which are the hotel concepts. Going down to building uses here, which of these building uses would you prefer to see on the upper stories? Most folks, 39% said lodging or boutique hotel, and then that was followed by other. And when we examined those other uses, a lot of folks said office spaces, or that was an opportunity where they just put a wish list of businesses they'd want to see in Dallas, or other very kind remarks that they left for the city. As well as, again, there was some feedback there for people wanting the additional park and recreation space. And then this is the part of the survey where we got into the specific site design features. So these were kind of the photos that were accompanying these questions, and I left the labels off on here, but I'll go through each of these one by one and explain what each of these were. So this first one is asking about a ground level commercial retail type store. 51% of folks definitely said that they'd like to see some kind of that kind of use or feature included in the site. For question 16, this was a question asking about a restaurant with outdoor seating. 42% said that they'd like to see that. 35% said that it'd be nice, but not necessary. The following question about that was just general outdoor seating. So this would be kind of like a public plaza or just general outdoor eating space where someone can get a to-go meal and eat it there instead of eating it inside of a restaurant. Again, pretty evenly split on yes, definitely, or yes, it'd be nice, but not necessary. This next question asked about a wine tasting room featuring wines locally from Polk County and close to Dallas. This one received some pretty mixed results here. Most folks said it'd be nice, but not necessary. But there were significant amounts that either didn't have a preference or didn't really prefer the feature. And then this next question asks specifically about street side outdoor dining. So what this would be is more of tables on the sidewalk, close to the street, similar to kind of how the tables are set up outside a New Morning Bakery. So there's not a designated outdoor seating area. These tables are just along the building and open for seating. And again, the preference here was yes, definitely, or nice to have, but not necessary. Um, this next feature with the yellow umbrellas and cafe lights, this was a specific call out to a public plaza or gathering space. And again, 32% said yes, definitely. 36% said it'd be nice to have, but not necessary. One of the more popular options is this next one, which was a rooftop bar or deck area. 55% said that that's something that they would definitely like to see, with an additional 23% saying that's nice but not necessary. Going on next to access to the mural, was this next question that we asked, and most folks said that they didn't have a preference, while following behind that, 25% each either said definitely or it'd be nice, but not necessarily needed. And then going on to the last question here, this last question asked about mimicking and replicating the design of Mill Street on the south side of the street and having that same type of street design and sidewalk with adjacent to this new site. And 57% of folks said definitely for that. And then going into this last slide here, these were the highlighted design concepts from other buildings across Oregon that we asked folks to rank and consider. And the percentages that you see here are the percentages that folks picked that they were either very compatible with downtown or somewhat compatible. So this first option here was the runaway winner, so to speak, with 63% of folks saying it either is very or somewhat compatible. And then these other three options were all pretty closely bunched together, with just a little bit less than half saying that they were very or somewhat compatible. And then the last option that we presented, most folks did not view it as compatible with the district. Are there any questions on the survey or the results?
Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Was it, or was it 20, the one where people, Peter Shenaba, where you said it was just outdoor seating for people to come and have outdoor seating?
Yes.
That would mean that it wasn't tied in any way with the building or the restaurant or the hotel. It was just outdoor seating.
Right, kind of like an open public plaza that would be open to the public to sit there and enjoy their lunch. It wouldn't be tied to having any type of seating associated with the restaurant, just something more open where people can go and meet freely.
That's interesting.
Anybody else have any? Thank you. Oh, Trevor, you have anything?
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I think it's nice, the vision statement, that the majority of the respondents seem to agree with what direction that it's going. So I think that's good feedback from the city.
Yeah, and I'd say that was also generally the feedback that we got from those that attended the open house. Once folks kind of saw all the information in one place and talked with us at the staff level and then our consultant team, a lot of folks really were interested and behind the idea. We didn't really receive any outwardly negative feedback from the open house that I can remember. Charlie, do you remember any?
That's good. I'd be curious to hear more about Bob's informal man on the street survey that you did in your store. You heard what they did. Did you hear anything about what people do?
No, I just.
Then why didn't you?
Try putting a big hotel in downtown Dallas.
That's fair. I just wondered if you were able to get a sense of what they would like.
You know, I'll think the next time I get that response from someone.
Yes, ask them,
I will ask them.
okay, tell us what you don't want. What would you? I'd be curious.
This was a very good project that you did here. I like the results. It does, as Trevor was pointing out, does kind of give us a lot more confidence in some of our decisions that we're making here about where we'd like to go. It kind of fits in the scheme of things, so just really encouraging, yes.
Years ago, there was a survey done to see if Dallas could support a second motel. Because the owner of the motel in Monmouth got tired of sending people to Salem for Western Oregon school activities, parents' weekends and stuff like that, football games. So they said, no, Dallas could not support another motel. And the one that's downtown. Well, the owner over in Monmouth didn't like that answer, so he did it anyway. And I don't know how many years ago that's been, but it's still the second motel is up and running and seems to be busy. So sometimes these surveys are not quite there, especially if they live in some other town and just happen to say, no, this town won't support it. So keep that in mind.
This is just an oh, go ahead, Marlene, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna give a bit of history. So in 1994, I bought, the big house where Taters is. It was just a big house at the time, and then I built Taters behind it. But, I had a bed and breakfast there. I had 2 rooms, and then they ate breakfast at Taters. Which at that time was a different lady ran it. But I was continuously booked by local people who lived here, and they had family visiting, and they didn't want their family staying in their houses. It was overflow and etc. But even in the 1990s, there was a need for housing in Dallas, and at the time we just had the one hotel, I think, at that time. But I was constantly booked.
Yeah, I think it's pretty telling when the architect who did working on the project stayed in Dallas just to do the event and spend time downtown. Stayed at the Best Western, and there was no elevator. So I think there's definitely some demand there. And hearing that too, from their perspective, how much demand there is for small communities, access to wineries closer to the beach, and family visiting and just having another option. I agree. I think it's.
Well, I have always felt that having a hotel, a nice hotel downtown, is like infrastructure. It's like infrastructure that goes into a subdivision. Gotta have that in there for people to be able to stay and eat so that they can come and tourism can thrive. And we just never really had an expansion on that.
Did you have?
Yeah, this is merely an observation, neither bad nor good, but the design preference, they got 63%. Those of you who've been around here a while might remember the Gale Hotel used to be painted.
I was thinking the same thing.
The picture looks like the Gale Hotel to me.
It does, yeah.
And also looks similar to the bank that was
Yeah.
there on the
Yeah,
side.
yeah, I
On
know,
the side itself.
except it's a little taller.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, but that's just about what the bank looked like.
Do you guys know what that building is? That photograph?
The
Isn't that the
Atticus.
hotel in the
Yes.
winter?
Yeah,
It's what?
It's the Atticus in McMinnville.
Minville Hotel, no. Well, I really do appreciate you doing this. This has really been very helpful, I think, encouraging for us to see what other people are thinking about the project and where we're headed, and it sounds like we're on target. Any other comments?
One, not on the 791, but after our meeting in August, and because I couldn't get a word in, because Skype or Zoom wasn't working for me at the 4 o'clock meeting, wanted to let you know that my employee walking on Court Street past whatever it used to be, the Ponderosa, with even the sidewalk there, she tripped on it and broke her arm.
Oh, no.
So we need to get that sidewalk done on Court Street bad.
That's a requirement of the property owner to fix it. So,
Charlie can tell you all about that. All we
There's a
need
new
is
sidewalk there.
all we need is a formal complaint, somebody, and that's what initiates the process.
I asked Mary if she was gonna complain. She said no, he was in the sidewalk there, but walking back, she forgot, but.
Well, you can do it. You can file a complaint.
That's true, anybody can come, like, I think it can be anonymous, but if you're further not anonymous, why would you follow? That's how this one just got done, it's all stemmed from a citizen complaint.
Well, we'll move on then to, that's it for staff report. You have nothing else right now?
Nope.
Thank you. Chair comments, I have none. I thought last month's meeting was just, really, really helpful, and I'm looking forward to visiting with those folks again. Member comments.
Sorry, I thought that's what I was doing.
I just wanted to give a quick report on the mill site redevelopment group. That advisory group met again just last month. There's gonna be, I believe, an open house coming up towards the end of this month.
Sometime this fall, we haven't set the date.
Okay, sometime this fall. Still looking at design concepts, but just to let this group know that some of the designs will have impact on our district here downtown. So pay attention to that as those come out, and there'll be some feedback, and you know, if you have any questions.
Anybody else? Okay, any other business? Next meeting, we do have an issue at the next meeting, the 5th of November is election day. And typically we don't meet on election day, so unless there is something urgent that staff would like to have covered, I'm suggesting that we postpone it or just miss that meeting and go to December. Anybody have any discussion or disagreement with that? Ben, I'll let you take charge of that then.
Just let me know.
Okay, well, in that case, if you want to go watch the debate, meeting's over.